Can I just say at the top of this that it did not occur to me until we were an hour into the film, I watched it with my partner, that we had started watching it at 2100 hours on the 21st day of the 21st year of the 21st century. And then we looked at each other and went, fucking hell. It was all a bit 6th of June, 6 a.m. You know, I was like, oh dear.
It's all getting a bit numerological around here.
It is, isn't it? It is. Yeah. That's just the kind of paranoid nonsense that this film deals in, isn't it?
But I did enjoy the coincidence, if nothing else. It was like, whoa.
Yeah. It's not even numerology. It's just numbers.
It is just bullshit, isn't it? It's not even it's not even proper numerology, as awful as that can be.
The Omen is to numerology what Madonna is to the Kabbalah.
But then, I mean, to be
that's all it is.
I like that. I really like that. That's what an analogy. Wow, that should be on the DVD box sets and everything. That should.
Talking about DVD box sets, I'm sorry. I mean, I think you can forget you'll believe a man can fly. You can forget just when he thought it was safe to go back into the water. Good morning, you are one day closer to the end of the world is one of the best taglines for a film ever.
It's pretty good.
I've never seen that one.
Yeah,
no, I think I've seen that one, to be honest.
That was a part of the immense official publicity, which cost almost as much as the film.
I can imagine.
Film was cheap. And they put a lot of money into the publicity. But yes, that was the official theatrical tagline. Yes, good morning.
The one I know is, if something happens today, it could be ...
Yes, I think they went through several.
The Omen.
Yes, as they went through several titles, because you saying The Omen, which I can't do very well, works far better than saying The Birthmark, which was its original title.
Oh, really? So they give away basically one of the sort of big reveals at the end of the film in the title. That's brilliant. Absolute brilliance.
It's funny how The Birthmark doesn't work, but Birthmark would be okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Birthmark, because it's just non-specific enough to just about get away with it. With it.
Broken into 2 words as well. That would have really.
I just like the fact that the birthmark is the thing that kind of seals it ultimately for Gregory Peck. You know, all the supernatural stuff that's happened notwithstanding. You know, let's just ignore all of that. It's the birthmark that does it.
Well,
I've seen people eaten and attacked by dogs that seem to be organized by some supernatural force. I've seen so much, and yet I just need to have a look for this birthmark just to be absolutely sure.
This gets us right into one of the things about this movie, which is that it's not really about what it says it's about.
No, of course it's not. It's nothing to do with metaphysics. It's nothing to do with religion. It's not. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It's like most of the horror films from this era, to be honest. You know, it's like Rosemary's Baby. It's like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's expressing something consciously or otherwise. It's expressing something really turbulent.
Yeah, and certainly for the Peck character in the original movie. And it's, funnily enough, in the remake, which we might talk about a little bit, it's even clearer, and it's clearer for the wife character played by Julia Stiles in the remake. The issue isn't, is this child satanic, demonic, the son of the devil, the Antichrist, or anything really? Like, as you say, you know, that it's the birthmark that finally gets Robert Thorne to the point where he's prepared to kill the kid, and having seen everything he's seen. And that's because it's not really about, you know, is this kid the Antichrist for him? The real issue is is my child defective?
Yes, that's it, isn't it? It's expressing this very strange, but actually quite topical at the moment, division between generations, right? This film is as much a product of the 60s as it is the 70s. It's all of that sort of like older generation paranoia about the liberation of the 90s.
Those counterculture kids who they no longer recognize.
That is absolutely it. I've seen this film so many times. I used to watch this film as a kid. We had it on an old battered. It wasn't even the official VHS. We taped it off of the television, so there are adverts on it and all sorts.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just having flashbacks.
Yeah, me three. I should be saying, oh shit.
Seeing it roll, see increases in
numerology again.
Everything, right? I've lost my train of thought now.
I'm sorry, that's my fault. I think
it was partly mine because I came in with the numerology gag again.
But no, it's such a weird thing.
Generation
film
gaps is what you were talking about.
But I never realized until watching it today when I got home from work just how pedophobic it is, just how much it absolutely hates children.
Well, one of the interesting things is that they cast Gregory Peck, right? And Gregory Peck is he's an old guy at this point. He's an old chap. He's from the golden age of Hollywood. Well, I don't know, maybe he's from the later golden age of Hollywood, but he is basically this guy made movies in black and white with Ingrid Bergman,
Right. He's kind of Hollywood aristocracy, isn't he?
Yeah. And he's Atticus Finch, but they cast this guy and he's older than the character needs to be. He's older than Lee Remick. He's older than the character needs to be. He's older really than it makes much sense for him to be.
Absolutely. As a parent, it really does.
He needs to be that age because the movie is about like that older generation and how horrified they were by, as you say, the 60s generation. And it pulls this weird sort of conjuring trick where it doesn't actually talk about that generation. It projects it forwards. Like, what if the next crop are even worse? That's what it's doing.
I noticed this time around, like the framing of Damien. Damien is not a character in this film. Like, almost at all. There is no character to Damien at all. You have no insight into who Damien is as a little boy, as a person. He is like the archetype of child, but the archetype of child as the cuckoo in the nest, as the alien. Something that I mean, it goes even further than that, actually. One scene that really struck me this time round is the fact that Gregory Peck's character can't even communicate with his wife, except through the medium of a psychiatrist. To understand what is going on in his wife's head, he has to talk to the male psychiatrist who's treating her.
Yeah, he has to talk to John Stride, and then he doesn't even listen to him.
No, right?
Makes sense of something that Jack said as well, because in effect, I mean, I think Gregory Peck was just over 60. Lee Remick must be 15 to 20 years younger than him. So you actually are dealing with three generations in the way that this film is cast. I mean, he can't understand her.
Right.
Let alone getting into the child. So I think it's by accident or design. And I know they wanted Peck originally and thought there's absolutely no way we'll get him.
Right.
And then the circumstances in which he became involved were quite interesting as well from a psychological standpoint, because Charles Bronson was approached to do it, and Seltzer didn't want Bronson. He said the film would be ludicrous. It's not going to work.
That would have been very interesting.
And who was the other? Another very, very well-known actor actually turns up in the first sequel, playing the brother of Robert. Yes, he was considered. He turned it down. But in the end, the reason that Peck took it was his own son took his life the year before. His agent said, throw yourself into work and throw yourself into something that's confrontational. And Peck chose it because it was about the most confrontational thing, because it was about a father's relationship with a son he's going to kill. I mean, extraordinary for this. Someone who really not only sold his star profile on being mild-mannered, sort of heroic, homely, almost a kind of heir to James Stewart in a way, and yet willing to go into quite a dark place as a man.
He does have, of all the characters in this film, he has the most complex arc, doesn't he? Damien doesn't have one. He's not even a character. He's an archetype. The wife is this spectral Cassandrine figure that barely even features, except as ironically a portent of doom, as a walking omen. He and David Warner's character are really the only actual characters in the entire film.
Well, I take slight issue with that. I mean, I basically agree, but I would say I love Father Brennan. I love Troughton's character.
Father Brennan, yes.
And I
like
think
Bugenhagen as well, actually. Bugenhagen's great. But again, he's just an archetype, you know.
All the minor characters are great, but Father Brennan is probably, to me, he's the most interesting character because he is. I mean, his entire character arc happens off screen, basically, because we don't see his involvement in whatever happens at the birth of the child, etc. We only see him later after he has thought better of it and is trying to redeem himself. But his arc is that he's part of this satanic conspiracy. He has the mark of the beast upon him, and he's involved in this whole thing. And he comes round to the point where, presumably after he gets this massive cancer, he thinks, oh shit, actually, I don't really fancy hell.
This might not be the best of career paths.
In fact, Brennan, for me, in this rewatching of the film, became the key to really unlocking what I felt with certain doors and windows in this film that I hadn't considered before, and that actually on this viewing, I mean, the Omen, rather like yourselves, is a film I've seen many times, but there's been a number of years since I last saw it, and my engagement with it this time, the things I got from it were completely new. I was really quite surprised at the sort of new information I felt was coming through. It was all very intuitive at first. I was like, hang on, why is this happening? And it came to the end, and I'm sure we'll go into it over the podcast, where I thought Brennan's really a key to this. Brennan's really a key to understanding so much of this. But it's fascinating.
And it's Troughton, it's the government. He acts everybody, including Gregory Peck, off the screen. Sorry, but
I mean, just to be prurient about it. I mean, he has the most epic death set piece imaginable as well. It's quite incredible, isn't it?
Yeah. The trouble with that is that every time I watch it, I think the next bit should be that you start to see a glow around the body, and suddenly he turns into John Pertwee. So that kind of ruins it for me.
Could you imagine later scenes? I told you to follow the body of Christ. Well, he's there with the daggers. Come on, man, reverse the polarity.
And there'd be no problem, would there? I mean, he's faced off against like demigods and devils and demons and personifications of evil a million times over, and has defeated them all. So, the Antichrist would probably be small potatoes.
But of course, what's interesting about this is, if you go back to the sort of origins of the film when it was still a screenplay, and before that, it was a prose. But when David Seltzer got to it, and because Richard Donner, when he came on board, really wanted to make it very ambiguous about whether was Thorne just gaslit by Baylock and Brennan? And Seltzer was like, no, not having any of that. It is what it is on the tin. It is a horror film. It is although interestingly, this time as I watched it, and I absolutely accept what you're saying about how much this film hates kids, but more and more watching it this time, I thought this is basically a really wonderfully over-the-top political opera that uses biblical prophecy vaguely allegorically.
Yeah,
and therefore it is absolutely in the same context as something like The Changeling, which we then made reference to. I mean, there's even a changeling in it. But then when we made reference to things like All the President's Men and that post-Nixonite, it's dominating this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
it's a conspiracy thriller. That's really what struck me on this rewatch. The first time I've rewatched it for years and years and years. I was watching it. I was thinking, I never noticed before that this is a 70s conspiracy movie.
Yeah, it's another film about paranoia, isn't it? I mean, like on every level, but it just saturates every element of it. I mean, it's like interpersonal paranoia. It's political. It's obviously no mistake that the principal character is like next in line for the presidency.
But I'm glad that Seltzer really threw Donner into the groove, if you like, of what he did, because actually Donner as a filmmaker is actually, I think, pretty good at making Toot and Hokum seem right, because he has them played earnestly, slightly operatically.
It's so earnest, isn't it? That was one of my big takeaways this time round.
And he is good at that.
That's why it works.
Dolorous clanging of church bells, isn't it? This film, there's no irony, at all. Everything is just leather,
absolutely right up front.
It refuses
and I have to say,
let.
just on a basic level, before we get into the nitty gritty, watching it again, I thought I just love the look of the film, the autumnal imagery. I mean, the really cute thing of the family snapshots could have been so awful, and yet it just actually drove the pace on, and the pace of the thing is already pretty fast. And the refusal to pull back on that, as I say, that sheer operatic scale of the backstory, even with an operatic score, all the lashings of faux mythology, and all compressed into this. I mean, I really just had a good time with it. It's a great piece of hokum.
Yeah, it's great fun to be involved with, isn't it? And part of the fun, I think, is that you have to go with the universe of the film itself.
Yeah.
So you have to get over the fact that priestly characters are not human beings in this film. They are agents of some divine knowledge or authority, and they talk like they are. They don't talk like human beings. They talk like repositories of arcane knowledge.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that all the priests, literally all the priests in this, are actually Satanists. Like, you got some.
It's a very fundamentalist Protestant take on the Holy Roman Church, isn't it?
It's very. Luther would have been very comfortable with it.
Which again,
papacy, Antichrist.
Once again reflects the era of it.
That was in the air, absolutely.
Absolutely. Revivalist stuff was really huge in the 1970s. The roots of the big mega churches were coming about then. The fundamentalist movement was really sweeping across the board.
And it almost seems like 3 years after The Exorcist, which was like the best advert for the Catholic Church, the Omen went, screw you.
This is fundamentally a very, very silly film, right? But it works. It really works. It's precisely that refusal of irony, that determination to just do it dead straight, completely dead straight. And it is, I think, I much prefer it to The Exorcist.
Me too.
If nothing else, that it actually has an implication that there is a scale to it. I mean, as I think rightly said when we were discussing Legion and then harking back to The Exorcist, it's really, so what?
Yeah,
I mean, apart from the initial, this poor young girl, but it's like, well, that's it. That's not exactly got a damn
right. The supernatural forces here, they are vast and they are unseen. They're personified in Damien, but they can get you anywhere.
And the fundamental thing about this film is Christ is not here. He is not anywhere in this film. I mean, even the end with the, if you like, the MacGuffin of the daggers, because of course, as we know in Revelation, it is spelled out. Only Christ can defeat the Antichrist.
Right,
Christ is not coming in the Omen. And it is even when Father Brennan meets his end, I turned to my partner and said, who's getting him here? This isn't the God. This isn't the New Testament God. This is fucking Zeus. This is older gods he's pissed off.
This is exactly what I thought on this rewatch. I thought this is a universe. The metaphysics of this movie are that the devil is real. Absolutely. And the devil believes in God and the devil believes in Christ, but God and Christ don't exist.
They have no agency at all, do they? There's no evidence.
Well, they don't exist.
Divine authority.
Not here.
The devil thinks they do. For some reason, this force thinks there is a God, but there isn't. This is fundamentally a materialist universe, except for the fact that there happens to be
a devil and infernal forces.
Yes. And I think this is the point with Father Brennan, because I think Jack's just hit upon the very nub of what I thought watching this film. It's like, my God, this Father Brennan, when he's in the office of the ambassador, when he's in Robert's office, and the way he's talking and the way he's describing things, the closest you can find, if we're going to do that thing of try and find some connection to his faith, is probably the doctrine of real presence in the Eucharist. We're talking about material, or Father Brennan is talking about materialist salvation. The actual, it's not just an act of faith. Salvation works by material action, not spirituality. And the film keeps coming back to this. You have to get down and dirty, and at the end you have to kill a child with knives. This film all the way through is basically, if it's got a religiosity underpinning it, the closest one it's got is the doctrine of real presence, because nothing else fits. It is, I think that's the thing with Brennan. He wakes up to realize, and I think this is where it all backs into the wider context of the political, economic, and everything else, is, oh my God, the only way to defeat evil is to defeat it in this world. And actually the cut and thrust of Revelation, which says, actually, you know, we're going to go through some dark times, but it's okay. There will be a tyrant, but there will be the four horsemen. There will be this, there'll be that. The sun will scorch human beings, but Christ will arrive at the end. And Brennan is to realize that no, Christ is in man, and man has to do something. And
it's material. It's hard.
Material.
Yeah. I mean, the phrase Brennan keeps using is "drink his blood."
Yeah.
Accept Christ, drink his blood, and that's hardcore transubstantiation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very much so.
Absolutely. And I just thought, this is as I said, this is the doctrine of real presence. I mean,
absolutely.
This is fascinating to put in a film like this.
You could take the metaphysics of it as being quite confused in many respects, because of course, Revelations, which is what the Antichrist is meant to bring about, is something that has to happen within biblical doctrine. If you are fighting against it, you're actually fighting against God, not against the devil.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think this film makes perfect sense in its own terms, because even a lot of things that don't apparently make sense actually do, if you think about them. Like one of the things that, you know, I realized on this rewatch is that, okay, so what's happening here is that every time an individual thinks something or does something or decides something that in some way threatens Damien, the supernatural force that is in some sense emanating from and or around him, watching, guarding him, guarding his interests, it eliminates them. And it's, again, getting back to what Elliot was saying, it eliminates them in decidedly material ways. People are skewered on lightning rods, people are decapitated by sheets of glass, and they're accidents. They're material, physical, mechanical accidents. So it's the material world which is doing this. And one of the things you think when you're watching it is, well, I mean, why is Robert Thorne still alive? Why does Robert Thorne get to the point where he's just about to do it? And you know, it's just, there's a split second in it. Well, of course, the whole thing is, essentially it's a trap. It's designed to get him to do it. The force is actually, I mean, it's a bit like the Force in Star Wars, which is actually just another way of talking about plot. The Force in the Omen is, again, it's just plot, and it is this. I mean, it's the machine in the Deus Ex Machina. It is getting Robert Thorne to the point. It is actually all the deaths that eliminate people around him but don't for some reason eliminate him. The point of that is that whatever this thing is, it is getting him to that church with the child with the knives, because it wants that to happen, because of course, and the film tells you why at the end, because it means that Damien gets to be adopted by the president.
Absolutely. It puts him where he's supposed to be. Everything is pre-orchestrated, isn't it? It's a theater.
And this is why this is actually a satanic film. It's not just because it has in its own terms, it has a happy ending. The good guys win as far as this film is concerned, because this film has the metaphysics of this film is that is what's supposed to happen. It's a brute, nihilistic material. Just, you know, the real world is plot, and what is supposed to happen is what gets you to the end point. So and
you see that all the way through, don't you? You see that in the readiness of characters, like the little suspicions that characters have, like David Warner's character. You know, the fact that he comes to this strange conclusion based on not very much really, and then takes Gregory Peck across the world. What I've just been saying, actually, incidentally, is the secret inner reason why media, like photographs, know in advance how people are going to die. That's why because the act of photography, of filmmaking, if you like. When you take a photograph of somebody in this film, you see on the exposure how they're going to die. You see the loop of the noose, you see the line of the lightning rod, etc. That's because it's already written. It's already in the plot. It's predestined. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, it goes back to this notion of even the metaphysical force is actually being material in some way. They have some sort of physical presence that can be captured, that can be recorded. So they are there. They are not they are not just magic.
And it's interesting how that works its way down from, and it could be completely coincidental, but the decision in the screenplay and in the original story to make it the Antichrist. Now, I know they slightly fudge it by saying by sort of linking the Antichrist with, the son of Satan, which is not actually, to be found in anything.
Nope.
But the Antichrist as presented to us, which is false prophet, it comes back to a material earthly evil. I mean, you had I think Robert Graves did a load of workings out of numerology and said, it's definitely Nero, when he was doing his research into that kind of thing. But it's the same thing. We're not, and rather like Christ, and certainly in the in the story of Christ's birth, Damien just doesn't pop into the world supernaturally. It might be an abomination, it might be deeply, but he has a physical birth.
Well, yeah. Well, that's another point, actually. I mean, you consider that this power is manipulating him so that he takes temporal power in politics, right? And you have to wonder, well, why? This thing is a miracle worker. Okay, they're dark miracles, but they're miracles nonetheless, right? It has incredible supernatural agency, and yet it's manipulating events so that its ultimate agent, its child, takes temporal power as a president, as a leader of nations, so that presumably he can wreak very, very temporal and very material chaos.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? That it's fascinating.
Go on.
It's doing it for the same reason that any force stroke plot stroke machine of the type I was just talking about makes things happen so that the hero gets to the end point that the hero needs to get to, because the hero is the hero. So
that's
it. That's literally
it's such a weird metaphysics for the film, isn't it? So like, whatever you want to call this supernatural force, whether it's Satan or whatever, and the story, the plot are the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I love how Gregory Peck's character, how Robert Thorne bashes into Keith Jennings and the camera drops. It's so loaded as a symbol. And then he's looking at the camera and said, well, have I fucked it up? And said, well, you'll owe me one. It's that thing that Jack's saying. It's all about, suddenly the world, because this is a film, this is captured through lenses, and suddenly the lens gets extra special significance. And of course, from that point on, the lens shows us the ends of the film, or the ends of character arcs and so on.
There's almost like a meta quality to
totally
it,
yeah.
I
mean, it almost
but
we've sort of come across onto a film where we had that sort of palate cleanser with Legion, and we thought, well, maybe we're wandering away from these films that have this meta quality, or they somehow are plugged into their own media in some way. This one totally is.
It totally
and
is,
I didn't expect it to be.
No, it's such a strange thing, isn't it? I don't know why I never picked this up until very recently. It just never occurred to me that this was part and parcel of what this film is, let alone all of the other implications that it has. The fact that it's unconsciously expressing all of this boiling cultural and political turmoil. It's incredible. It really is.
I wonder. I mean, I've not seen the 2006 version, but there was one thing that I was.
For this.
I knew you had from your from what you put on Twitter, but it occurred to me watching this film, because there is a strong media element in it. I thought, isn't it interesting how, if this film was not a product of 1976, if it wasn't a product of 2006, one of the things that did occur to me vis-a-vis Damien is that it's almost like he's downloading what it is to be the Antichrist a bit at a time, because there's an innocence to him. I mean, he slowly gains understanding, and I thought that's the kind of metaphor, if this film was made now, that maybe someone would seize on, the fact that it's coming down in bits, because he is cajoled into certain acts. And I love the scene when they're approaching the church in Guildford, because the fear of the church, I mean, of course he's terrified, and it's not because he's the Antichrist. I mean, but it's great how I think it's one of the coups of the film, actually, which they present something as being simultaneously that response is because it's almost like Regan. Oh, he's burning me, he's burning me. I'm so close to a church, I can feel the heat of God. It's not that at all. It's fucking hell, look at that building with that bloody great spire on. I'm just a kid. Because at this point he only will have I almost no awareness. And in fact, later on, of course, with Mrs. Baylock, she opens the door for the tricycle to go out. There's no agency in what Damien's doing. He just seems to be following blind. Well, not blind. He is being manipulated. But I love the idea that there is a certain innocence to the Antichrist.
It is compounded. I mean, if you take the films that follow as any kind of canon, it is compounded in the next film, of course, because he's a young man in that film and doesn't know until it's revealed to him that
don't they try and sort of juxtapose it with like puberty and things?
It's
a very vague memory.
There's a lot going on in that second film. It's not a very good film, and one of the things that I actually watched the original and the second film back to back this afternoon. And one of the things I was thinking about the second film is, you know what, the fact that he's the Antichrist actually makes him a million times more sympathetic. Because if it were not for that, he would just be a born to privilege, inherited power bastard. He would just be a complete just the most vilest of human beings. Making him the Antichrist ironically makes him a weird kind of victim.
I think the Omen does it as well. I think the Omen just makes the institutions, particularly in Catholicism, but the institutions of the church and all religious dogma are probably the frightening thing. It's almost so much more frightening than Damien.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you have to bear in mind, like, he is born into this. He is a victim. He is absolutely a victim. He is. Gregory Peck's character says he's just a child. He throws the knives and says, "I won't do it." He's right. He is absolutely right. And if he thought about it for 2 seconds, he could have actually gone home and taken Damien and raised him to be a better person. To be away from all this silly metaphysics. Of course, that wouldn't happen because, of course,
whatever film,
the plot, the grand plot that is both Satan and God.
But of course, without getting too Nietzschean about it, because I've got a lot of problems with Nietzsche. But the basis of From Beyond Good and Evil, which is everything is a response to something that's already there, master slave narrative and so on and all that crap. But there is a certain kernel of something in this, and particularly with regarding Christianity, everything is negation. And negation of some of another narrative. So it's right, so it's all pretty bloody shady from the off. Again, without either sounding Nietzschean or like a new atheist, because I reject both.
Yes, absolutely, we bloody do. Yes, we do.
Where do we go from there?
Yeah, my God.
One of the things that I did again think was that, it is interesting how films like this, and you were saying earlier, George, that this comes out in a sort of cluster of films like The Exorcist,
absolutely,
Baby, you mentioned, and when you were talking about regarding children and the perception of children, and a lot of these 70s movies do actually feel like a hangover of the failure of 60s radicalism in a broader sense. The decade that sees this major rupture with the idea that there might be absolutes, and of course this is
bizarrely the fear of it happening again. Absolute. That seems to be what the Omen is commenting upon. It's like it frames Damien as this alien thing. The film even dares to comment upon it through Cassandra Thorne or whatever her name is. Her name's not Cassandra. Her name is Catherine, I think. But actually, Gregory Peck's character calls her Cassie at various points, and that's what it's like. Interesting. Cassie Cassandra. But she actually, there is a commentary on that. When he's talking to the psychiatrist, he actually says she regards your child as alien. And it's like, well, yeah, he is. In this film, the film sees him as alien. It frames all children as these bizarre cuckoo-like creatures, except the dead one. The dead one is preferable to the evil live one, right? Yeah. There's something rather pedophobic about the whole thing.
And even the manner of the Thorn child's death, because you only see a quick cutaway, but it's like, oh, they just stove his head in. It's nothing particularly, my God, it's the extreme violence of it.
The implied violence is really nasty. I mean, one of the most affecting scenes, I think, is when they actually go to the cemetery and they find the jackal corpse in one grave, and then the actual body of the child.
Yeah, I must say, by that point, that if you would have given up on the film by that point. It's got you. So when that stone lifts up and that's what you see, you're still on board. It should be absolutely absurd. And of course, part of your mind is telling you, of course it is. Yeah, and yet, even this time, there's no sniggering. You're like, well, I'm in. I'm on board.
Yes, and again, it's that strange gravitas that the film affects all the way through, even when it's being really bloody silly. And it does get, I mean, like in retrospect, thinking about it, it does get really bloody silly. A lot of the set pieces are really silly. The nanny hanging herself, sort of like, it's all for you, Damien. It is kind of absurd, isn't it?
That's actually that scene. I mean, firstly, if you fell that far, your head had come off. But obviously, heads coming off is reserved for later in the film.
It would be kind of like champagne talk, wouldn't it?
This is one of the things that I always used to think. Well, why does Damien or whatever kill the nanny? It's not actually clear at all why that happened.
It's not, is it?
But of course,
I don't know. Maybe it's just like a feeling out of the power. It's just the force not quite coherent around him yet.
On this rewatch, I realised why.
I don't think it is Damien, is it?
On this rewatch, I realised why. It's so that Keith Jennings will take a photograph and find the line, which will set him on the course that will make the plot work.
Right. But I do wonder if even in the framing and the cutting of that scene, I don't get the impression it's Damien. If anything, it seems to be.
No, it's the force, isn't it?
It's whatever that. I mean, the dog is watching the hellhound. And it almost seems like, well, we've got to. I mean, it does. The one part of the film that did make me laugh, because I thought, well, why didn't they just do that? What they're doing is they're making way for the fabulous Billy Whitelaw. But of course,
she's great.
But what later happens is, well, what happened to the old housekeeper? Oh, she just left. And it's like, well, she got off pretty easy then. Like, I expected her to see her
executed
in some grand.
Right, as it goes in this film, that's actually not too bad, is it? You get to leave.
Well. we don't actually know that she just left off screen. She might have been.
It's a fair point. She may have been pecked to death by crows or whatever elaborate death.
She was making a cake, and she accidentally gouged her own head open with the food blender.
That is another element of this film, isn't it?
Cooked herself in the microwave.
There is a kind of holdover from like cheaper, nastier horror films of the era, in that it does have the sort of elaborate death set piece that are set up and they're lent weight and context by this incredible, choir in the background. And you're just waiting. It builds them and it builds them. You're just waiting for that sword of Damocles to fall, whatever the hell it is. And they're always very, very impressive.
They're great deaths. I mean, none of the subsequent films have deaths that are a patch on the deaths in this one. You have the,
they're
obviously
all a bit milquetoast actually. In the subsequent films, most of the deaths are a bit milquetoast. There's a guy who gets crushed between trains. Yeah, there's the lift.
The only one I remember.
The lift isn't bad. Yeah, the guy that gets cut in half by the whatever it is, the cable. That's okay, but the rest of them are all pretty bad.
The rest of them are a bit naff, aren't they? And Bugenhagen, I thought, could have done with a lot more than what he gets at the beginning of the second film. It's all a little bit that's a bit boring.
It's interesting in the remake. I mean, I find the remake really interesting because it is basically the exact same script.
It's the exact same film. Like,
it is basically
shot for shot. It's exactly the same film. You wonder why they bothered watching it. It's the same film with a cast that's about a decade younger. In almost all cases.
I don't know if it's shot for shot, but certainly the script is incredibly similar. It's basically the exact same script. But one thing they do is they change details here and there. So the Jennings character in the remake, who is played by David Thewlis, which is great casting, he gets his head cut off in pretty much exactly the same plot moment as David Warner.
That's it.
Keith Jennings does.
Don't they even do the trick with the like the multiple cameras and everything again, with the head spinning in the air and all that garbage?
I don't know. I don't. I mean, I've only seen it once, but I don't think so. What they do is this. No, what they do instead of the sheet, it's not a sheet of glass. You see, it's like there's some guys working on a roof, and one of them drops a hammer. It's very Heath Robertson, It's very sort of anvil and frying pan.
I was going to say, is it like that game Mousetrap?
It is very Mousetrap. Yeah, it really is. It's like like those people that do YouTube videos where you tip over a domino and it causes an orange to roll down a track. But it kind of causes a iron sign or something to swivel downwards, and it does cut his head off. But I don't know. It's really weird.
Well, I actually think this might have been something that emerged positively out of the original film, because I think they did have a big sequence planned for the 76 movie. They couldn't pull it off.
Right.
Oh, they ran out of time, they ran out of budget, and then some rather practical, clever person said, well, why don't we just have the van backing in, the lorry, the truck back, and do it this way? But apparently, I'm sure I read somewhere that there was an elaborate scene. Well, obviously, because I've not seen the 2006 one, they finally got to do it.
Maybe that's it. Yeah,
maybe that's it.
In the modern one, they did what they always planned to do. Yeah, and it's not as good.
I was going to say, it's ironic, isn't it? Because the quiescence of the 1976 one actually works really well, because the choir doesn't kick in like it does for most of the other deaths. It's really quiet. You just see the van backing up. The brake goes off and it backs up, and then suddenly that sheet of glass is off and his head just is off.
I do like the comment that David Warner gave, which was, did you ever wonder what happened to that prosthetic head? And he went, yes, I lost it in the divorce. It was like, yeah, absolutely brilliant.
As I said before we came on, one of the things that did break verisimilitude with me is that, he's supposed to be a member of like the British press or like the news media, isn't he?
Too honourable.
He's far too eloquent and intelligent and honourable and well-meaning to be that.
Yeah.
Yes,
he would be firmly on the side of the Antichrist, wouldn't he? If he were a member, he would be firmly on the side of the Antichrist.
Well, he's just I want to know more about him. I just want to know we sort of get what his angle is, but I'm kind of fascinated by him, because David Warner is an actor. He's been a favourite actor of mine for many years, and I've had the great fortune to have even worked with him.
Wow.
But he just happens as an actor to freight in a lot of thinking. He always looks as though he's thinking. He's got whether it's something he knows how to do or whether it's just incredibly intuitive on his part, but he's got a tremendous ability to say lines as if he's thinking of another reason to say the line than the obvious one. And I know that's something that actors try to do, but he still manages to say things in a very clean way. He's not a fidgety actor. He's not trying to draw your attention away from the intention. It's just something he can't help but do, I think.
Yeah.
But I watched this film and thought, if there ever were an extended cut, I would want to know who he works for. Is he like a bit on the outside of the Fleet Street?
Yes, because you do get that impression. Just by his nature, you get that impression. The fact that he asks these questions and that he has this degree of imagination. That is fascinating about the character, but you really don't get much in the way of explanation, other than, of course, what Jack says about him being absolutely necessary for this plot to go ahead and for this orchestration to
and therefore works in the context of something which is very media driven, because of this thing like cameras, lenses, photographs, how plot locks into them and so on. But yes, it's just there is just this, and in a way it's great that they don't do it, because there's this part of it going, I'd love to sort of think through the gaps about him. He seems like a loner. He doesn't seem like a real fit for.
He's got it's an interesting thing, but he really has an almost like a gay coded quality about him. in that.
Yeah, slightly.
He really does. It's something I noticed this time around. He is this loner character who seems a little bit counterculture. He seems a little bit like below line.
And Warner, he doesn't wear the uniform of the 1970s Fleet Street guys. He's a tad more flamboyant, but I think Warner does the absolute right thing of not pushing that too much.
Yeah, definitely.
Warner finds a way to convey a meaning behind things he does that don't immediately make sense. Like there's no particular reason why like a freelance photographer at that children's party would be taking photographs of the nanny.
Right.
Now you could play it like he fancies her or something. But that's not what Warner does. Warner plays him as interested in her.
Yes.
And he does the same thing with Father Brennan. He conveys this idea of just being interested in people and faces and what they do.
He's like someone who likes looking through lenses.
Yes.
That's his thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and you kind of get the idea this guy probably wanted to be, an art photographer, an artist photographer of some kind, and ended up having to do this to make a living.
Working for rags.
And Warner gives him this slight air of sleaziness to start with, which gradually gives way to the point where you start to realize that there's a nice guy under here.
There's a sincere concern for humanity here, which again is I mean, looking at it from a 2021 perspective, knowing the British media and press as we do is sort of like, wow.
Yeah, well, there's, I mean, as always, I mean, I love 70s cinema, but as always, there are these moments of startling naivete. Like a little while ago, Daniel and I for IDSG, we did Peter Watkins' Punishment Park, which is an amazing film. But one of the things in that is that it
looks almost quaint now.
This is one of the things we said in our episode. You have this moment where these protesting kids are being brought before this tribunal, and it's presented in the film as just this horrific authoritarian measure, that they've been convicted of terrorism for being protesters, and they might be sent to prison for as much as 5 years. We both had a little laugh at that one. But you get that with this, because I mean this is another one of these movies which is basically, it's saying, wouldn't it be really scary if a bad person got to be the president?
Yeah, right. And also the protagonist and the good guy, the one who's expected to save it all by the end, is a born to privilege politician.
In fact, the book goes in, it fills out this in rather interesting ways, and actually makes the Peck casting even better, because in the book where he's Jeremy Thorne, not Robert Thorne, it goes into a lot of detail about various things. I mean, there's whole scenes where he's setting up diplomatic meetings with the Saudis, and his brief from home is specifically, get us the goddamn oil. But in the book, Jeremy Thorne, as he's known, spends pages and pages wrestling with guilt over his own wealth, but also even more interestingly, his latent sympathies for communism. And it goes back that he was actually something of a student radical in the 40s, was frightened off by the House of Un-American, all the representative, frightened off all by that, and compromised with an almost Kennedy-esque liberalism. And the book spent these chunks of chapters with him having kind of internal monologuing of his guilt about putting away his radical politics, compromising with the liberalism, gaining all the money. And actually in the book, his MO is he sees the fight against the Antichrist and Satan as some way rediscovering his integrity. He can fight the forces that he has compromised with by redefining them in mythological or religious terms. And that's an element of the book that obviously they had to streamline. There's no way you could have got that into the film. No. But I think the thing with Peck, because he almost looks like he could be a Kennedy uncle, looks like he could be part of that set, and then to find in the book that he's actually carrying a lot of this kind of guilt about his politics and about his inherited wealth and so on.
Wow.
And then you overlay that back onto Peck's performance, and then all the situations you described earlier about the generational thing, and it really fleshes it out nicely.
Wow,
that
would
fascinating.
be
Like Jack says, it carries a naivety, but it's because how would he have got that far, even into the Kennedy administration or whatever?
Yeah.
But the fact that it's there in this universe, which, as we've already said, it established itself as much more operatic, and but the idea of this guy who was frightened off by McCarthyism and
that's fascinating, because
brilliant. It's really exciting.
Film, barring his obvious, I mean, he's obviously intelligent and cultivated in the film. He's an urbane person, but you don't really get a great idea of what his politics are at all.
No,
you
know,
only get his lifestyle.
He doesn't really have politics, does he?
Not at all. Other than the fact that he is a politician of some description, that's all you get. He does things that politicians do, but only mechanical things, technical things.
And it's Gregory Peck, so
yes.
As I said before, it's Atticus Finch. So
it's Atticus Finch, right?
He
so
just
he carries
semiotically
in stuff. Yeah, I mean, in the same way as Warner does with Jennings. I mean, Warner freights in. You can't. I think for David Warner as Jennings, although alas there is no recording of it, but he's the definitive Hamlet of his generation, and we know how he played that Hamlet.
Right.
And that runs into. I mean, it's both something that is a kind of useful resource for actors, but at the same time a bit of a curse when they get really associated with a certain thing, because it freights into everything else. But it can freight in interesting ways, and I think for Peck and Warner and Whitelaw, it freights in such interesting ways, because of course once you see Billie Whitelaw, who only rarely did film, playing Mrs. Baylock, all you can think of is Beckett.
Right.
And she freights in all this Beckettian stuff just by association, and because her acting style is mannered, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way. It's right. It's right that she is that bit more expressive in this film, because
she's superb, isn't she? She's such a presence,
and she heightens it, but the part demands it. But she just freights in all these associations with Beckett and that universe. And
I have to say, one of the things, as I said on Twitter, the 2006 remake, I was very surprised to find that I didn't actually completely hate it, despite the fact that it's not a very good film.
It's odd, isn't it? It's fine.
Has got,
it's the definition of fine.
it has got some points here and there, and one of the things it has, its secret weapon, is its casting in the smaller roles, because it casts the smaller roles brilliantly. You get Gambon as Bugenhagen. You get Pete Postlethwaite as Father Brennan, which is perfect.
That's perfect.
And one of the amazing things that it does, to my mind anyway, is it casts as Mrs. Baylock Mia Farrow.
Mia Farrow, of course.
Talk about bringing freighted associations.
Yeah, I mean that is so deliberate, isn't it?
Oh boy.
And she's really good. I mean, possibly because I don't want to carry any water for Woody Allen, but I don't think Mia Farrow is a particularly nice person anyway. So I think Baylock comes
too much acting.
Yeah. One of the things the remake changes is that it changes Kathy's death. It's still Mrs. Baylock goes to the hospital and murders her, but whereas in the original film she chucks her out the window, in the remake there is a genuinely horrifying, so I don't know how medically plausible it is, but there's a genuinely horrifying sequence where Kathy's on a drip, she's being fed blood, and Mrs. Baylock just takes a syringe, sticks it in the pipe, and injects a bubble into the pipe, and it slowly works its way down. And Kathy is conscious the entire time. She's watching,
but can't do anything about it. Yeah, it is one of the better sequences actually, because the defenestration again is a very 1970s trope, isn't it?
Very, yeah.
You see it in many. Yeah.
But
it's really sadistic, and Mia Farrow does this thing where she puts a hand over Kathy's mouth and she's kind of speaking to her soothingly and watching her the whole time it's happening. It's really quite blood.
She's got much more of a nanny quality about her than the one in the original film. I mean, Mrs. Blaylock in the original film, the minute she meets Damien, she just basically says, "Yes, hail Satan! I am a Satanist."
She goes full witch, and it's one of my favourite moments in the original. "Fear not, little one, I am here to protect thee." It's brilliant. It's great. But Farrow does something different, where Farrow never fundamentally breaks character. She does, like, she's basically, on the surface, she's Mary Poppins all the way through, even while she's doing stuff like that, and it's actually really good.
Actually, and it's a bit more, I mean, if you're going for that more realist approach, which of course the remake does do, it's a 2000s film, it does make sense. Whereas Blaylock in the original film is, I mean, they should have known, shouldn't they? The minute they meet
it's Billy Whitelaw.
And also that bullshit story she tells, you know.
Right. And the fact that she's constantly, like, she's trying to take over the household. I'm going to introduce a dog. I've just brought this massive dog into your house. It's like, well,
like, why she isn't fired there and then, to be honest, you know.
It's so funny, but it's I think I'm now, my interest is somewhat piqued by the remake, because one of the things about the 76 one, I mean, I can go in with my eyes open, which is fine. You know, I've wasted 90 minutes of my life on far worse.
It's one of those bizarre remakes
where
you watch it and you think, why does this exist? You know,
I'm getting the impression of crumbs. Is it Gus Van Sant who did the? The remake of Psycho.
It's very reminiscent. It is very early 2000s horror films.
Incredibly dated. You like the 76 one is visibly just a 1976 movie.
Right. So it has all the charm of a 1970s film.
Whereas
this is like
the remake,
nothing. It's like
so relentlessly 2006. Like it has the bleached color scheme.
It has the blue fucking filter of every horror film from that era, which if I ever see that again, I will throw something through the screen.
Because it's not old enough to have become old. I mean, one of the things about all the 70s films, they're relentlessly brown. but I love that now.
Yeah,
they're not relentlessly autumnal.
The 2006 one, it has the offensive movie autism thing going on, which is 2006 to a T. Yeah. It has the blue filter. It has the Hans Zimmer Batman style music.
Yes, God,
it spends its entire time screaming, "I was made in 2006."
Yeah. And also, I've got nothing to say.
It's production designed up the wazoo to the point where it's distracting, everything.
It's one of those remakes that was decided in a boardroom, basically. And you can tell, oh, there's an audience for this. Let's, the Amityville Horror is out. We've done a remake of that. Let's get this out as well. We're doing Halloween as well. Let's do this. It's the Omen remade, almost shot for shot, with a few key differences.
But I always used to find
no context.
Hilarious.
I get the feeling there were probably rights issues. Like, I don't know who owned the copyright, but my guess would be that Seltzer retained copyright, and he said, "No, you can make it, but you make it with my fucking script." But I think that's what probably happened.
That's probably it.
But used to often happen, particularly, it seems to me, in the horror genre with early 2000s remakes, is that they would be slavish, except they would make a few dunderheadedly literal choices. And the one that always stands out to me, I mean, it's a fucking appalling film. I mean, the originals aren't very good, but I find them quite quaint and fun. But I remember when they remade Friday the 13th. One of the few glorious things about Friday the 13th, I mean, let's face it, they're Friday the 13th movies, but one of the things I always loved about the early ones is the idea, comes back to sort of things that we discussed in Blair Witch, that Jason is kind of born up again from this hole in nature, and so the idea of him in the first 3 films, I think after that point, you don't really need any more. You probably don't even need 3, but I'm very, very accommodating with horror films of a certain era. But the idea that he could be everywhere at once was tapping into the kind of preternatural folk horror element of the whole thing. And in the remake, they decided, no. What he's done is he spent all his time growing up creating secret passages and tunnels under Crystal Lake. And it's like, fuck off.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Oh, let's explain everything.
We're going to explain an ambiguity.
Back mythology. Yeah. Oh, Jason Voorhees does this because of this in his background. Michael Myers, he's not a mysterious semi-metaphysical shape. No. He has all of this traumatic backstory, and we're going to show you far too much of it.
Because that's the thing. He was the shape, and Jason Voorhees was the forest. He was Crystal Lake.
Yeah.
He's the personification of Crystal Lake's all the bad things that have happened, and it's sort of. But no, we can't have that. But
it's one of my nearly 40-year-old curmudgeonly rants. I've got to say, I hate the Freudian backstories of horror movie icons, of fantasy villains. I hate
all that. Screw that.
I don't want to know why Gaston from Beauty and the Beast is a prick.
I was just about to mention Lindsay Ellis' movie about the live action remake of Beauty and the Beast, where she talks about exactly this, where she talks about how the live action remake of Beauty and the Beast is dreadful because for some reason the people making it thought they had to address like fan nitpicks, and the bullshit narrative about how Belle is a victim of Stockholm syndrome, etc., and suddenly Gaston needs PTSD to explain why he's a dickhead, etc.
PTSD. I don't want to know.
No, Gaston is a portrait of toxic masculinity.
Yes,
that's enough. That's enough.
In the original, in the Disney film, in the original cartoon, the whole fun of Gaston is that he is an inversion of the Disney prince. He is Prince Charming, but taken to his logical extreme. He's even designed to look like Prince Eric, but a buffed up version from The Little Mermaid, right?
He's Prince Charming, except that he's a prick. That's the point.
It's taking the Prince Charming archetype and exposing like the toxically masculine elements of it. It's actually kind of clever, The
point of the story, whatever you think about it politically, and it's not beyond criticism, there are things to criticize, but the point of the story is that it's about toxic masculinity and about how it's possible to overcome it. That's right. That's the whole point of that fucking movie.
Yeah.
And this is the issue sometimes when certain things are remade, or they are, because what happens is they're sort of unmoored from their time. Because one of the things about the Omen that kept coming back to me, and I was thinking about it in context of every episode of this that we've done so far.
Talking about the 2006 remake, that's something, that is really what's going on with. That's why it's so fascinating to watch, because you're watching essentially the same script made in the wrong era.
Yes, in the wrong era, so it's got no anchor. It's got no context.
It doesn't make any sense, just aesthetically, because it's happening in an era with mobile phones and the internet.
Exactly.
So not just in plot terms, but obviously something about the 2006 movie is that for some reason, because it's happening quote unquote now, loads of things become more obviously implausible. Like in the original, if you think about it, suddenly the British ambassador, the American ambassador to Britain just fucks off to the Middle East, on his own. For some reason, because it's 1976 movie, you buy it. When it happens in the 2006 movie, just the American ambassador to Britain just suddenly, without telling anybody, without any orders, without any permission, just fucks off to Israel with a British photojournalist, and then comes home carrying a bag full of knives, which he takes on a plane. In the 2006 one, you can't help but think,
but I imagine that part of the problem there is it's not set up its context in the way that the 76 one in terms of that kind of operatic quality. But I did sort of think in terms of this film, thinking of them in a continuity of all the ones that we've watched, particularly the ones of that era, is that we'd said before when we were talking about Berberian Sound Studio that how the 70s in just itself is a fascinating time for films, because you get that big swathe of them. They become more violent, they become more down a hill, they become more nihilistic.
They do.
And yet you get more and more about, as in this film, sort of threats to the environment, moral panics about permissive society. Oh my God, our counterculture kids, like we said earlier, Christianity, especially, the American evangelism, that kind of pearl-clutching Church of England,
Middle throughout all these movies, the Middle East,
absolutely
a huge thing. These movies are obsessed with it.
Saudi oil in the background, but this 70s concern about what I found really interesting watching The Omen, because nothing speaks of the time it's set in quite like the moment when they're talking by the burger van or whatever is getting a coffee, and the 70s concern about corporate interest growing beyond a certain acceptable scope of capitalist interest into the massive pyramidal structures that swallow up whole states and become more authoritarian that we know now, that's here now. But this wonderful little moment of innocence where you've got this, we can presume, Democrat Kennedy, quasi-Kennedy senator concerned about really rapacious capitalism, things going beyond what they think is an acceptable structure, and the idea of therefore the Antichrist emerging from politics, but politics of a very proto-neoliberal kind. It's politics in corporate power.
It's specifically tied as part of the prophecy. I mean, it's such a reach that they even have to lampshade it in the dialogue. They even have to have Gregory Peck say that's a bit of a stretch. But it is specifically linked to the Treaty of Rome, the foundation of the common market. Absolutely. And also, very tellingly, as I say, these movies are obsessed with the Middle East. It's tied specifically to, as the phrase in the movie, when the Jews return to Zion. It's tied specifically to the foundation of the State of Israel, and by extension, the State of Israel's rise as a nuclear state in the Middle East.
As a nuclear state, and what's really fascinating is I'm watching something that was first shown only a few years before I was born, so it's technically almost within my lifetime, and for what is an operatic, in some ways quaint piece of hokum, and it's like, well, hang on, all these little this drawing of breath over teeth, we've all sort of seen this. And I sort of joked at the end to my wife, I said, oh, it's a great Brexit movie. Actually, no, it's not a great Brexit movie. What it is, it's a rarer thing. It's actually a great Lexit movie. Because it's suddenly just watching that, the European common market being sort of compared to the Holy Roman Empire, and just at this pretty shitty business person's club, and oh my God, what if it's not the panacea of continent-wide utopianism?
Well, look, I mean, the ultimate,
Remake, by the way,
the ultimate message of the film is, the Armageddon is heralded by the, it's strongly implied ultimate accession to the presidency. That is to say, the top job in in the most powerful imperial power of the modern world. Of course, when this was made, it was a bipolar system. It was the American Empire and the Soviet Union. But the American presidency, the top job in the American Empire, the accession to that of somebody who comes from wealth and privilege, who's tied, their coming is heralded by the rise of the neoliberal system and neo-imperialism in the Middle East, etc. Okay.
I mean, what would have been perfect? Because it's wonderful that they actually go to Israel, and as I say in the book, we get that background that I think he might even be mentioned in the film. Actually, it might be over when his secretary calls him in about the summit with the Saudis. But what you really need in the film is just I know it's 76. It would have been perfect if it was 73. You just need a television on in the background with Salvador Allende being brought down and Chile. You need that in the background, just behind him while he's working on some papers or something. Then it would just absolutely gel it all together, wouldn't it?
and it's impossible to fully get behind it, because it is fundamentally that conspiratorial view of politics, and because the occultism, the numerology, etc., that is just baked into the conspiracy theory as a theory of politics, as a theory of history, and that is where you end up if you try to understand things like this without an actual material and structural perspective.
I mean, this is and it's, for a film that's trying to say it's operating on a material, it's pure.
What they're doing by the burger van when they're they're doing the exegesis on the prophetic poem, they're basically baking a Q drop. I mean, come on.
That's exactly what they're doing. Which I have to say, but it's the only bit in the film where I think I wish someone had taken a little bit longer on that. Because that is some shit poem.
It's terrible, isn't it? And it's not.
Tina What's-Her-Face from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy level of, it's like they could have had a few drafts of that. I mean, even if you just follow the versification of the King James Bible, that would be enough.
Of course, obviously not from the Book of Revelations. I mean, clearly not.
Well, none of this is from the Book of Revelation. Like even the bits, the quotes, like the famous quote, let he who hath understanding count the number of the beast, etc. That's got nothing to do with the fucking the son of the devil. Nothing whatsoever.
Although interestingly, I do. There's quite an amusing line with Keith Jennings, Warner's part, where they're all just sort of stood around talking about, and I love scenes of people just stand around talking and just sort of.
This is your film, then, isn't it?
This is my film. But because they're starting to talk about the 666 and where it comes from, and they're talking about Christ in relation to the Antichrist, and he talks about the Holy Spirit as counterpart to the Antichrist. But again, the Antichrist is a false prophet. It is a physical being which is being juxtaposed with a purely spiritual one. And this does seem, like we were saying earlier, to be a film that has real horrors that are material. And you must have a material understanding of Christ and Christianity to tackle them. You can't merely have kind of religion existing in the world of the spiritual, and all the earthly evils to encounter, and so on. But yeah, it's just hit me again. I know it's about 45 minutes ago, but yeah, every victim, as Jack says, does not die of a supernatural act. It's iron spike, fall from window, gunshot, sheet of glass, hanging.
even the succeeding films actually bake that in. I mean, the most supernatural death that happens in the second film is when Damien kills his adoptive brother. Effectively, he just looks at him and he dies. Effectively, but even that is explained in medical terms. There is a scene after where the doctor says, "Oh, he had an aneurysm." It was something that was building for years in the background.
What it is it's Oliver Stone's JFK. It's the witnesses gradually get killed. Joe Pesci is telling Jim Garrison about the conspiracy, and then all.
Oop, have we lost you?
Oh, Jack, you dropped out a little there, man.
That's what it is. It's the conspiracy theory movie. It's the witnesses being bumped off one by one.
Yeah, absolutely. It has all of the gravitas and all of the structure of a political drama, does it?
JFK,
so what this is doing is it's making the logical next step in the 70s conspiracy movie, and therefore by extension that conspiratorial view of politics. I can't remember the name of the guy that coined that phrase, the conspiratorial view of politics. Was it Hofstadter? I can't remember. But it's that worldview taken to its logical extreme, because as I say, that this occultic, numerological, supernaturalist outlook on the world is just baked into that, which is why
it is absolutely
follows long enough you end up at stuff like QAnon, which is essentially a new heterodox religion.
Or
it's
David
that taken to its ultimate
reptilians, circles,
absolutely, it's just that taken to its ultimate extreme, because what it's trying to cope with is this alien, inhuman, invisible system that just make things happen that are completely out of human control and crushes people up under its boot and so on, and doesn't seem to have any kind of way in for people to have any effect on, which is the whole problem. And it makes it literally spectral and immaterial. It's still material. What it does to you is still material, but the mechanism by which it does that is just not, you can't get a grasp of it. It's
absolutely. Or even
invisible.
Like the intention behind, it's very difficult to discern in these films exactly what the force is, isn't it? Or why it's doing what it's doing. What are its imperatives? It is absolutely inscrutable because it is unseen.
And as I say, ultimately, again, it's the perfect encapsulation of the conspiratorial view, because ultimately what it turns out to be is that it's engineering the ultimate scenario, which is that this kid gets lined up to be in time, he gets to be the next president in what is implied to be like his adoptive political dynasty destiny. So the ultimate aim is this engineering of a political outcome. And that's exactly what these people think. That's QAnon.
But do you think there's an interesting irony at work here? Though, because
they literally think like high-ranking politicians are Satan worshippers. I mean, I'm not even,
or reptilians.
The reptiles. Do you think there's a sort of interesting irony insofar as, there's obviously a real lineage now of films which run on the conspiracy theory. There's this one. We have, the China syndrome, although that's rooted more in fact, All the President's Men. Then you go through to JFK, Nixon, the Stone movies, 7 seasons of the X-Files, and
very topically the Matrix,
and the Matrix. And yet, in a strange sort of way, in one sense, you look at that and you think, well, the film industry is an industry. It is born out of the capitalist industries. And in a way, you could make the argument that there's almost a kind of gatekeeping going on here. No, in the sense of you take various ideological arguments and you sort of flatten them a bit through, by saying, well, it's a conspiracy theory, it's this, or it's just a few evil capitalists, or whatever it might be. But the irony of it is, because we now have so many of these films, if you don't go into the rabbit holes of conspiratorial thinking, what does come out of them for people who don't swallow those pills is, but what you're actually saying, even if you're framing it in a sort of cray-cray way, is there's the shadow of a problem. There's actually a real problem. We're looking over here somewhere because that makes for good copy, that makes for a good film, that makes for opera. But you're actually showing us that by the gatekeeping, that your gate's a bit wobbly in the first place. And it only takes more analysis, more history, more material history, and a more a critical lens on life to go, well, actually, it's not what you're saying, but you have at least drawn attention to some of the sicknesses we think actually are there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But the trouble is, I think that there's so much material in the culture, and culture is where people live. Political textbooks and newspaper articles are not where people live. Culture is where people live. And there's so much of this stuff out there that it becomes like a worldview in waiting for anybody that wants to adopt it. It becomes, because it's so omnipresent as an idea of how the world works in fiction, it becomes kind of just a default worldview that people can fall into automatically, particularly in a world where people are systematically not only not politically educated, but politically de-educated. And you end up with a system where people actually mistake it for an actual picture of the world, because it's there's kind of a trap inherent in texts, I'm afraid, where metaphor is just this. Metaphor is just kind of the best way to express things, but metaphor is not a very good way to really understand things. So when you keep on you keep on making these movies or books or whatever that really powerfully express certain feelings about the world through metaphor, what you end up with is a very good cumulative expression of how people feel, but a very bad actual material diagnosis of how the world works, and people mistake the one for the other. I think that's which is partly how you end up with stuff like QAnon, because people have a certain idea of how the world works, which is at least to an extent shaped by movies like this.
It's even more problematic now, isn't it, where people are so desperate for some sense of prescribed identity, and that's what these structures provide.
But even burrowing down into and that's the word, even burrowing down through the metaphors is structure, because of course all stories, for a vast swathe of them, there's this conception of good and evil because you need conflict, and that's everywhere in our storytelling, even if it's of a secular bent, because we're soaked in all that stuff. We're soaked in the religiosity of it, really, and it's just secularized. And so I mean, I just think, I mean, I absolutely buy that, and I think that therein does lie the problem. That it's the miasma of these. It's easy ways to think about the world. I just find the wrinkle of it's quite amusing that in delving into this area across so many films at the same time, there's still just this. Yeah, but you're also saying that there's a reason to maybe not look that way and down those rabbit holes, but you're
a reason to look
not working. Something's not. Like, it doesn't have the integrity
I think that feeds into what we were talking about earlier. I mean, it is that incredible malaise of the 1970s. Everything isn't working. Everything is collapsing. All of the promises, all of the structures and meta narratives are failing or have failed at this point. And that seems to be part of the nihilism of this film and others of the same era, others like it, which are presaging this incredible collapse into anarchy and chaos. Right.
And look what happens when he there's even a character moment where he tries to wrest control from that very thing, fate, because Thorne makes the decision over in typical fashion, doesn't think of his wife. He makes the decision over the abortion because he wants to wrest control from fate. In a similar smaller way, Jennings is trying to do that by even forging a relationship with him because he simply does not want that photograph to be the image of his death.
True, right? Yeah, but
and of course they fail.
It's presented, isn't it? Well, inevitably. I mean, not only do they fail, but by trying to prevent it, they bring it about. It's inevitable. It's a trap you can't get out of, isn't it? Because you are a character in the film, you know.
Another sense in which this is a profoundly 70s conspiracy movie, because I mean you have things like All the President's Men, which obviously has a kind of a happy ending, but the far more quintessential move is to have the ending of defeat, you know, like stuff like the parallax view, etc. You know, it's much more the system wins, you know. Another thing that interests me is the extent to which the cultural discourse around cultural artifacts like this actually flattens them down into a view, and propagates a view of them that's actually inaccurate.
Yes,
the way people, like you were talking before about. The omnipresence in this sort of popular storytelling of a kind of Manichaean good and evil view. And actually, a lot of the time, a surprising amount of the time, when you get into actually paying attention to texts like this, actually reading them, you find that the situation is a lot more complicated than that. It's not just in the sense that I've talked about in podcasts and essays before, where a lot of the time where you look at stuff like this because it's promoting reactionary worldviews, the political and moral position of the quote unquote villains is actually far superior to those of the heroes. It's not just that. It's also that, I mean, in this film, as you just alluded to, Elliot, Robert Thorne is a very high-handed patrician man who overrides his wife and is extremely possessive and makes decisions for her and stuff like that. And it's one of the things I like about the 2006 remake, actually, is that it harps a little bit more on the fact that Thorne has a kind of complicity in the act where he deceives his wife by taking on the adoptive baby and then lying to her. It kind of emphasizes in a way that this film doesn't emphasize the fact that he has sinned. He is complicit in this conspiracy. Even
it's almost like the original sin, isn't it? You know, in this universe.
But even so, it is in this. You know, Thorne is a flawed man in this, and that's how this happens in the first place. Well, and yet. Our discourse around so much of this popular culture actually does it a disservice because we talk about, it's just the goodies versus the baddies.
Yeah. Well,
there's stuff like
this
that.
Film,
but it's not.
I mean, this film, even his first intention, it sort of links him into the whole the whole mythology, because his initial agreement to the changeling is temptation. He has been tempted. So it's there right from the outset. But that simultaneously somewhat idealizes him as well. It's a really curious.
It does, because it's that whole road to hell thing, isn't it? Paved with good intentions. He's trying to spare his wife's feelings.
Yeah,
but it's another part of what's interesting to me is, I mean, we were talking about this earlier. The plan apparently was always to cast an older actor. They wanted Bronson, they wanted Holden, they wanted Peck, they wanted somebody of that generation. I mean, I think Bronson.
Burt Lancaster was another one that they.
It's part of the point, isn't it, that they want this? They want a picture of this happening because of the maybe well-meaning and understandable, but the flaws which do stem from a possessiveness and a certain authoritarian.
We could have had George C. Scott again, couldn't we? It would have been a trilogy then.
If they would have
been good in this, actually.
Yes, he would.
He would have been fantastic in this role.
Yeah. Although it's something, I mean, this is just off the beaten track, but it was while I was watching it, and I thought, well, obviously this is a Richard Donner film, and the next thing he would go on would be to make Superman.
Obviously,
I thought, Greg Peck is the obvious Jor-El. He even looks like Christopher Reeve. Why did they put Brando within a wig?
Especially considering he wasn't interested in the role at all, and it's very clear.
I mean, Donner always said they only had ever one falling out, which was over the scene when Lee Remick's character is killed, and Peck said, "I think I should tear the place up." Everything just hits him, how much he's betrayed, and Donna said, "No." He said, "If anything, I'm actually going to do a slight time lapse on this." And they apparently had a little bit of a clash over it. And
interesting.
When Peck saw the edit, he was like, "Oh, I see what you're doing. I see what you're doing. Yeah, you cannot allow me to have too many heroic moments because I'm a bit of a shit."
Right, and also, I mean, you can't break the character down too much.
No.
If he's lost everything, the temptation would be to become nihilistic, wouldn't it? To just not care at all.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I simply can't. I mean, if the only time in the movie I did lose that suspension of disbelief was just how efficient the police were at the end. No fucking way. Not in this country.
Yeah, it did remind me a little bit of the famous thing about how, in Star Wars the Empire falls because of the guy that lets the escape pod go because he says there's no life signs on it. In this, basically, if we just ignore the sequels and we take this as a thing on its own,
which I think is probably a good thing
to do. Basically, because the as far as the film is actually concerned, the good guys, but in terms of our worldview, the bad guys, because they win, basically we're set for clearly, nuclear Armageddon, the victory of Satan, etc. Because those two cops in that panda car were on the job that night.
Just on the job, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that does amuse me about, it's just a little detail in the movie, is how the 70s hierarchy of power is really interesting. It's like, guess what, darling? I've been made ambassador to Britain. Such a step up over Italy. That's this chortling. I think, oh my God, that's hilarious. That suggestion is so hilarious.
Yeah.
But even again, there's something in that. They come out of the other countries soaked in the idea of Catholicism, and which is shown as being bad and conspiratorial, and then into Britain, good old Protestant.
Yes, with its rationalism and its reign.
Well, it's interesting to ask why. I mean, why set it in Britain or set so much of it in Britain? I mean, that is it. I mean, you could just have the whole thing happen in Italy.
Absolutely, or the US. That would have made a great deal of sense at the time, would it not?
I can only
again,
think
the remake is funny because they filmed the whole thing in the Czech Republic, I believe, and because loads of it's supposed to be happening in Britain, you've got shots which are very obviously Prague, but they've put like a red post box in the background.
Yes.
Sorry, you were saying.
I think I'm done. At about 10 minutes in, I think I was done, and everything else has just been blather.
With regards to the sequels, it's kind of, I mean, the second film has its moments. It's one of those really annoying things where there are glimmers of excellent ideas.
It goes out of its way to position Damien within the American ruling class, the American hereditary ruling class, doesn't it?
And it really does. Like
he's headed for Harvard and Skull and Bones and the whole thing.
It's repulsive. I mean, as I said before, were it not for the fact that he is the Antichrist and that lends the character a certain something, he would be the most loathsome character imaginable. There'd be no sympathy at all. But you do have that wonderful moment where he discovers who he is. Yeah. Which is actually really interesting. That's where the central tension of the sequel should have been. That could have been so fascinating. How do you wrestle with that?
It's a shame with that? Because it doesn't really work. Like, I don't know how he gets from reading that passage of Revelation to thinking, I need to check under my hair.
It makes no sense whatsoever. And also, he teleports. Like, there is a cut, and he goes from the literal scene where he's crying, "Why me?" And then in the next scene, he's fully on board. He is totally, I am going to fulfill this prophecy. I am the Antichrist. I will kill anyone who gets in my way. I mean, that's another thing. That's another problem with the meta. If you take if you just look at the story and take the metaphysics literally, then why does he do anything? All the Antichrist needs to do to defeat biblical prophecy is exactly nothing. Exactly nothing. By buying into it, he's setting himself up for failure.
Well, the interesting thing about the second movie is that it kind of says, okay, so we're going to tell the story about the teenage Antichrist. Okay,
Yes.
so how do we express that? Well, obviously we make him a spoiled brat, rich boy, son of a corporate CEO, longtime rich guy, and he's on course for political power. And the company that his adoptive father owns is going to start profiting from famine, etc. And he's at a military academy. So it goes out of its way to it just seems instinctive at this point in history for whoever's writing this to say, okay, the Antichrist obviously is going to be a spoiled white rich boy at a military academy whose adoptive dad runs a corporation, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what it's kind of saying with that is, what it's going to say, what if one of these people was evil? The explanation for why that's bad is that it's full of Satanists. Right. No, that's not why it's bad.
They're evil already. Just by dint of their existence.
What's interesting,
and the funny thing about the film is that it doesn't mean to do it, but it demonstrates that. The fact that he's the Antichrist means fuck all. He would be a damaging piece of shit when he grows up regardless. He is going to cause mass devastation anyway, just by dint of who the fuck he is.
And a good filmmaker would have pulled that out for the third film.
Right.
And then he would have been, I think, a good filmmaker, an intelligent filmmaker, a director would have gone, well, knowing that context, because it's not hard. It's not hard to get that. You could have built that into the decline.
Yeah.
Actually, this is someone who wants to transform things. And it didn't have to layer on the diabolic stuff. It could have just been like, I'm in this position of immense privilege.
Yeah.
I could actually change things. And if he'd been brought down for that reason, that would have been a really fascinating end play on the film.
What about
the first film that this was the son of the devil? No, this is something else.
Give the Antichrist agency.
Yeah,
make him an intelligent entity. Say, well, I'm not doing that. What's do
funny
what I like.
Is that I mean, almost the starting point of the original story was Seltzer really not liking one of his friend's son.
Yeah, right. So I understand. Isn't that how the actor, the kid? I mean, he wasn't an actor, was he? The kid who plays Damien in the first film, he wasn't an actor. He was chosen because he was a little brat, right?
Well, he hit Donna in the bollocks, didn't he?
Yeah.
Donna goaded. Well, I mean, there might have been a bit of goading going on, but he wanted to see the child actors see if they could get aggressive.
Yeah.
And of course, most of the child actors got shy and ran to their mum, as you'd expect. And this kid punched him in the bollocks. This just went down.
This might be the quintessential difference between the original and the remake, right? Because the remake has the exact same scene where they take him in the car to the church and he wigs out, right? Yeah. But in the remake, it just doesn't work because it's stage managed and it's obviously rehearsed and there's loads of quick cutting which reveals that you get a microscopically shot of like Damien's head thrashing around or whatever, and then you get a close-up shot of Julia Stiles screaming and clutching her head and stuff, and you can see what's being done. You can see that the impression of a fight is being created in the edit, because for good or ill these days you just can't do that. In 1976 what happened was Richard Donner said, right, Harvey, on my signal, beat the ever-loving shit out of Lee Remick. And he did it, and they just filmed it.
I mean, it is a great scene, and he is wild, isn't he, in that scene? Like the guttural sounds that are coming out of his voice.
Wow. She got seriously hurt. He really went for it.
He went for it.
Yeah.
I mean,
lots of people got hurt making that film.
Yeah, so I understand.
Because he was blonde and they died. I mean, in a way, it also shows up something about you read about stuff and you think, oh God, this is slightly uncomfortable for our position now, but there is so much, rightly so, safeguarding, particularly on things like film sets and so on, around children.
Obviously.
But they just took him in. They dyed his hair brown because he was blonde. They put contact lenses into him. His kid's not very old. There were a lot of decisions taken with him, and you think, yeah, this is really a product of the 70s. It just would not. You know, it's like, yeah, well, he's the film company's property now, so we'll do what the hell we like.
The sort of Julie Andrews approach. I'll just give her some cigarettes, you know.
Well, again, you know, it's one of those things you can't mourn the passing of that world, but it does tell you something about why movies from that era have the very distinctive texture that they do. You know, like on the set of The Exorcist, Billy Friedkin was letting off pistols to frighten actors, to capture their, you know, Ridley Scott on the set of Alien, he just sprays his cast unexpectedly in pig's offal, you know, to capture their reaction. You can't do that now, and it's probably just as well that you can't do that now.
Although,
but at the same time, it does give movies from that era a very particular texture in moments like that movies now just don't have.
No, yes, the movie makers don't do this anymore for very obvious reasons. What happens is the brattish, usually white male 30-something actor does it instead because he's a
Jared
prick.
Leto syndrome.
Or and you know, I come always down to the same thing, which is, okay, even if this fed into a wonderfully spectacular performance, I still don't think it's a good idea. But you're not even very good,
right?
You know, I've seen actors who turned up just learning their lines, who give more verisimilitude to their parts, more truth, more edge. Come on, man, give it up. Go back to running your sex cult or whatever it is you're doing. Or maybe don't even do that, actually, because that's pretty icky, you know.
It's like you can't, you know, okay, Jared Leto making Suicide Squad, he basically harassed and terrorized his co-stars, you know.
Awful.
But at least we ended up with a brilliant performance as the hang on a minute.
Exactly. We ended up with a brilliant performance of the Joker by the next guy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who apparently is one of the sweetest, most well-behaved guys you could ever meet.
So I understand.
Go figure, you know.
So I've understood. That makes you even more sick, really, doesn't it? In certain ways.
It's you know, an unfortunate thing in the industry. This big dick swinging contest. It's really tedious.
And isn't it distressing how, you know, method acting has become this kind of alibi for this asshole behavior,
for being a prick, essentially.
When there's absolutely no resemblance to. And I speak as someone who was, you know,
Lee Strasberg is spinning in his grave.
Exactly. I mean, you know, this sounds more pompous than it should be. I'm just using the term correctly. I was classically trained, which simply means that you work from the text outwards, you know, and it's all about body techniques and your voice and everything. So we're a million miles from what, but you know, a lot of it's rooted in Stanislavski and Strasberg and Meisner. They were pulling out from that. But it is what Brando, when he was a young man, etc., were doing a million light years from this nonsense, this perversion, this warped version. And then, as Jack says, you know, you could just hang the word method off it. It's like, well, whose method? What method? You know?
What do you mean?
No, even the apocryphal stories about De Niro are just that. I mean, yes, he did go to his dentist and say, "Can I get my teeth made jagged to play the villain in Cape Fear?" Well, yeah, but they'll stay like it. Oh, there's no sort of thing you can do to turn them back. No, well, I won't do it then. And they were just made up in the standard way. But that story's been pulled out of all proportion. You know, it's like, De Niro had his teeth filed. No, he didn't. He just inquired if there was a possibility it could be painlessly, and it was reversible. It's like
the mythologization of this stuff.
And it's like everyone always forgets about the very famous story with Olivier and Hoffman, and the fact that that's been turned into a conflict, which it wasn't. They had enormous respect for each other, and Olivier said it tongue in cheek, and they, by the true accounts, they both laughed. You know, Hoffman was like, yeah, okay, maybe it's a little bit much, but you know, you've got to understand screen acting is a different thing to stage acting. But there was no conflict in it. But that's been retold as a story about a kind of generational conflict, and it's nonsense. No, it wasn't. I mean, the only pep talk David Warner had from Gregory Peck was, let's just do this really, really seriously, because if we could do it really seriously and like, you know, we might all get Oscars.
Well, it was nominated, wasn't it, for 2, I believe.
Yeah.
The Omen, which you know, a horror film getting nominated for an Oscar is a rare thing.
Well, it was back in that. I mean, this was one of those movies that came. not very long after. I mean, it's only like a couple of years after Jaws, isn't it?
Right.
Because Jaws is the big summer block. Famously, Jaws is the big summer blockbuster that, in retrospect, now we look upon as the first of that phenomenon. The sort of key in the lock that creates what we now think of as the tentpole summer blockbuster. And this is only, I think, Jaws is only 74, and this is a couple of years later. So they're starting to make these sorts of movies, and this could be the quintessential example of the very early attempt at replicating that. You go all out. You mentioned earlier
the publicity,
exactly, but at the same time, back in that era, it was still permissible to nominate very popular movies for Oscars. It didn't have to necessarily be a very boring, worthy 2-hour movie about civil rights, etc.
Right, it didn't have to be a biopic.
Yeah, a biopic, an insultingly inaccurate biopic.
Right,
of
a hagiography.
Asperger's who
it didn't have to be a hagiography of Winston Churchill. I love Gary Oldman to bits, but I will not watch. I will not. I just won't.
I think he's a ham. Never mind.
I've got my issues with Omen.
Early stuff, really good. These days, ham.
Oh yeah, these days, definitely. He hasn't done anything good for a long time. But I just like him in Bram Stoker's Dracula. I think he's after he's old, when he comes to London, he's beautiful.
Yeah, I prefer him in the early sections. I don't know.
Okay, fair enough.
Mysterious for you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why might we differ on this one? I don't know.
No idea, Jack. No. It might be that scene where he bursts out of the coffin for the first time and he's sort of like naked from the waist up.
I watched that film around about this time last year for the first time in 15 years.
I love it.
And I completely reversed my opinion on it. I mean, as a teenager, I hated it.
Yeah.
I really hated it. And then suddenly, as this curmudgeonly middle-aged man, I was like, okay, I can go with this.
It's a sumptuous horror pantomime, is what it is. It's crazy. It's far too over the top. It's wonderful.
I feel very much the same way. I went to see it in the movies in '92, and I fucking hated it because I was young and purist and priggish, etc. And I've had a very set preconceived idea in my own head about how I thought a new Dracula movie should have been done. And this was kind of the exact opposite. And I've really come around to it to the point where in fact, for me, it's a Christmas movie. It's a movie I always watch at Christmas, so I'll probably be watching it in the next few days. And the thing that really turned me around on it was when I realized that it's not an adaptation of the book. What it's an adaptation of is modern critical interpretations of the book. Yes. When I realized that, it sort of snapped into place for me, and I thought,
it's so clear that at some point the creators got round a table and said, look, we can't tell this straight. Everyone and their dog knows this story, whether they've seen any of the films, whether they've read any of the books. We've got to do it. We've just got to go for it. We've just got to go for something ridiculous and lurid and absurd, Well,
you watch any documentary about Dracula, what do they talk? What does Christopher Frayling in the documentary talk about? He talks about the fact, Bram Stoker took inspiration from, Vlad Dracul,
Vlad Tepes,
Impaler, whatever you want to call him, Vlad III of Wallachia. And then you get into the fact that Stoker had all these sort of repressed ideas, and that he was fascinated by, stroke, maybe even unconsciously in love with Henry Irving, that and then you get into the loads of the documentary will talk about Victorian notions about venereal disease and sex and repression and Freud and all that. And what that movie isn't an attempt to make a film of the book. That movie is an attempt to make a film of all that stuff that the book means.
But it also makes it actually, in a strange sort of way, it makes a film out of the essence of the book in a way that no other adaptation ever has, which is Dracula is a Victorian bodice ripper, and that film is a bodice rodice ripper. That's exactly what it is. It teeters on porn. I mean, and the book is, people used to say, when they used to talk about the Todd Browning one, it's only the first reel is any good. Well, if you read the book, only the first section is actually utterly riveting, and then it's only engaging in parts, because everything happens 3 times, and there's these huge long tracts in between the interesting bits, such as with the bloofer lady, Lucy, and of the big 3 horror novels everyone knows, 2 of them are actually works of genius, and that one isn't.
It's absolutely true. The most interesting part of Dracula is Dracula being a chatty Cathy with Jonathan Harker at the beginning,
totally.
Sort of playing cat and mouse with him,
Totally.
And he is a chatty Cathy, isn't he? He doesn't shut up.
Yeah, and it's Jonathan Harker saying, "Here I am in a strange place with this guy who won't let me go."
Yeah, right.
I mean, he hasn't seen anyone for a very long time, and an attractive young man played by Keanu turns up.
Yeah. and then it gets really boring, and then suddenly you're into this bit where it's all very decorous and innocent and ladylike and Victorian, etc. But what's actually being said is, yeah, I've got 3 boyfriends.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Count Dracula, the one who comes through the window every night.
I mean, there's at least a detail in Werner Herzog's Nosferatu, the vampire, where Klaus Kinski actually just starts stroking his head when he's asleep in bed. It's like, oh well, even Kinski could pick up on something.
Oh yeah.
I love the Herzog movie. That's probably my favorite adaptation.
That movie is in my personal desert island movie.
Yeah,
so it's away to a desert
but
island. I would be reaching for that one.
I am fascinated by the Coppola movie.
The Coppola one. It's the luridness of it that gets me. I just love it. I love the sumptuousness, the colour, the mysticism. I
love the fact that Winona brought him the story, the particular loose adaptation.
Right.
I love that she was the one who was driven to see Dracula remade as a big, and I think she must have been friends with, if I'm right, Sofia Coppola. I think they're more or less the same age.
Right.
And she said, "Can you give this to your father?" And
it's got a better ending than the book. I can tell you that.
This is good.
Sofia Coppola ended up playing Michael Corleone's daughter in Godfather 3 because Winona Ryder had to drop out.
That's right. That could be the connection then.
Yeah,
that could
I think
be
it
the
is.
Connection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. And,
but yeah,
she was fascinated by this take on.
Not to be gender essentialist about it, it's a very feminine adaptation of Dracula in many respects. So. It is interesting, and I love that it's just explicitly texturally right on the surface, in your face, about all the stuff that's in the book, but which Stoker himself, repressed weirdo that he wasn't conscious of.
Yeah, could not talk about on the surface. But even given that though, the book people did pick up on it, didn't they? Because the book did actually cause a little bit of a stir,
People picked up on it. Bram Stoker never did.
No.
I think Bram Stoker went to his grave thinking, what are you talking about?
Right?
This is just about 3 jolly good chaps protecting their women folk from a dirty foreigner. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Hairy, I don't know what all this foreigner,
Yeah.
Oh, crumbs, yeah. But I think if there's one great link between the execution that Francis Ford Coppola goes for and the film we're ostensibly talking about is, again, I think Coppola's got a similar kind of thing to Donner, in that they both have this. Stone has it in a different way, but he still has it, which is they do have this kind of chutzpah, I guess, where they put very, very audaciously operatic stuff, almost pantomimic stuff on the screen, and they demand you believe in it.
Yeah, that's it. It's that refusal of irony, isn't it? And irony is essential to psychological and emotional health, don't get me wrong. And irony in fiction can be wonderful. But our culture at the moment now, I mean, it's the postmodern condition. It's drenched in irony to an unhealthy degree.
Absolutely.
And I absolutely agree. Those 3 filmmakers are great examples of artists who, it's not that they're not capable of irony. That's a different thing. And that's a problem. It's just that they say, when they're doing stuff like that, when we're doing vampires, Satan, conspiracy, whatever, no, we don't have irony here. We just play this straight.
It's okay to tell an earnest story. Yeah. It's okay, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, the other one I would say, I would even add again that equivalence and comparison are not the same thing. But one other filmmaker I would say does this because he managed to win me over with a film that I thought this film is not going to work for me, and that's Malick. Because when I remember watching The Tree of Life, thinking, my God, this is your Catholicism absolutely writ large. And because you totally believe and because you're totally unironic about it, I'm along for this. I'm absolutely along for this. But they're rare.
In his way, Blatty, William Peter Blatty has the same sort of quality about him, although part of his seriousness is to be constantly questioning. So, and
although I think the studio helped him there greatly by not allowing him to do what he wanted, because I think their sense of the Grand Guignol really comes through at the end of that film.
Yeah, they force his hand a bit.
Of the film, but this
the problem with Blatty is he's constantly questioning and taking it seriously, and that's good. The problem is that his questions are not as interesting as perhaps they need to be.
Yeah. And I think that again, just on a very superficial level, on a basis of one of the joys of rewatching The Omen after so long was you're put on that horse right from the start, and they smack its ass, and you gallop for 90 minutes. It moves at such a lick, and I think if it, I'd be interested again how the 2006 movie handles this, because I just think if it were a movie now, it would be really dwelling on too many of the subplots. As I say, the 2006 movie essentially has the same script. Like they change some details. They change the details of how Keith Jennings' head comes off, etc. But basically, it's the same. And they add a couple of things, like they give Kathy a couple of nightmare sequences, etc. Which aren't bad actually. Like one of them actually made me jump. Seriously, it's okay. But that's basically all they do with it.
Yeah.
And I think weirdly, if they had just done a sort of the same premise, but with and they add a really bad sort of prologue at the Vatican where they're talking about the end of days and shit. That is awful. If they hadn't been held somehow to Seltzer's original script, I think the entire movie would have looked like the prologue, and it would have been just atrociously bad, because that is painful.
Gosh.
It's an okay watch. It's the kind of film that isn't badly made at all. There's nothing particularly wrong with it, but it just doesn't have the weight or the gravitas or the context that the original does.
Yeah, it has major problems. One is that it's so incredibly dated to 2006.
Very much so, and I hate horror from that era. I just can't stand it.
And it has Liev Schreiber in it, and I don't have any affection for him as an actor. He's just dull and robotic and boring to me.
That's a problem.
And it also does this quite offensive kind of movie folk autism thing that with Damien. Whereas, I mean, firstly, he's visibly too old. Like one of the things I've always wondered about the original movie is, why does it suddenly start? Like, you're telling me that's the first time he's ever been to a church. On this rewatch, I realised the birthday party at the start, it's his 6th birthday. That's
really
why it's starting. It's like his satanic puberty. He's coming into his diabolism. That's why this stuff is starting, because he's turned 6. Whereas they make the kid in the original movie he looks the right age. He looks essentially like he's just past being a toddler, and they make him this enigma. Whereas the kid in the remake, he's visibly too old, and they give him this offensive fake Asperger's autism thing going on, and then they make him, firstly he's drenched in blue the entire time, and they make him pull sinister faces and shit, and it's terrible. It's terrible.
It's the unfortunate way that caught on for so long, this kind of, well, we've got a character who either behaves brilliantly or behaves unconventionally. Oh, well, we'll give them an autism or Asperger's, and that just seemed that dominates that sort of 2000 into the
everywhere.
In this instance, the whole thing is just confusing. Like the characterization of Damien is confusing. Even the paedophobia, which is a clear and distinct part of the original film, isn't there. It doesn't make any sense in that context.
They try to make it make sense, and it kills it. Like there's a bit.
They try to apologize for it. Ultimately, they try to apologize for it by making Damien this or that. Whatever. They try to make him
definitely sinister, so that you won't have any ill feeling whatsoever towards Kathy, as Kathy gets more and more averse to him. So to the point where like they add a scene where she goes downstairs in the middle of the night, and suddenly Damien is behind her holding a knife, which made me laugh out loud. It's so funny. And then she sort of looks again, and he's actually making a sandwich, and it's just, that had me actually laughing out loud. How silly. But that's what they're trying to do. They're worried about, and like again, it's horrible, this fake movie autism thing they do with him. But it could have kind of worked, because they're latching onto something. As I say, the basic problem, the thing that's really being expressed with this hatred and fear and loathing of the child, is this horror at the idea of the child as a separate being that has this capacity to threaten you, because it is a being in itself, and it might be bad, it might be defective.
It's not just. I'm not
calling autistic people defective. I'm saying. Whatever I'm saying, I'm not saying that. Let's put it that way.
No, of course not. I mean, it's expressing a fundamental tension between parents and children, isn't it? But it's emphasized in the 1970s because of the cultural situation. It still exists in the early 2000s, because it's a universal element of the human condition. But because it doesn't have the right context, it's just confusing. It's bizarre.
So where's this come from? I take it.
It's an odd thing. It's a very strange thing. But then again, that's horror from that era, isn't it? The Amityville Horror remake from the same era. Again, another 1970s horror film that's expressing so much about that era. And it's like, it's all blue and grey, and it doesn't make any sense. It's just a haunted house film.
Yeah. And then the zeitgeist shifted slightly, and they started doing it with 80s horror movies. We got a run just slightly later than the Amityville Horror, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street came along, remakes of those things, and we got a remake of Poltergeist, which. What's fascinating? I mean, I think we're winding down now, so let's not get started into entirely new topics.
By the way, guys, if you want to do Poltergeist, I'm well up for that.
Well, I'd be
up for that. I love
really interested in talking about Poltergeist and the remake, because the remake of Poltergeist is a really good example of how these early 2000s, mid 2000s remakes of these classic 70s and 80s horror movies really go out of their way in a reactionary way to kind of reverse anything challenging or progressive or radical that you might find in the old stuff.
Or charming, like all the
gender dynamic in the Poltergeist remake is systematically reversed, and the gender dynamics in the original is one of the most interesting things. But they take it up, it's I hate to say it about a movie with Jared Harris in it, but because I love Jared Harris.
The family dynamic in the original, which is so charming. One of my favorite scenes in the original is before anything supernatural has happened, where the husband and the wife are smoking pot in bed. It's funny as hell. It's charming. It's wonderful. You get to see these people as they are, But
it's very pointed politically. It's about that 60s generation becoming homeowners and voting Reagan, etc. And it's a very female film, Poltergeist. It concentrates on women and girls relentlessly, and the remake comes along and they reverse it. They reverse it at almost every stage.
And rob it of everything, like charm and significance and wonder. I mean, I just love the cavalcade of the original Poltergeist. The fact that it's like it's almost the opposite of almost every film we've discussed. It is just a ghost train ride. It's crazy. It's wonderful.
It would be very interesting, because I think that's probably about 30 years since I've seen Poltergeist.
Really? Oh, it's great fun. It's great fun. Do not.
I mean, I remember loving it. But I think probably what did it for me was my parents were selected, it all seemed rather random, to basically have the alternative to the Sky satellite system, which was the BSB, British Satellite Broadcasting.
Oh,
remember the
blimey.
little square eels?
Wow.
I wanted that so much back in the day because they reran old classic Doctor Who on it.
Exactly. I mean, I was thrilled because I came home one day and my dad said, well, we've been selected to have one of these things put up on the house for 18 months and we don't have to pay for it. All we have to do, your mother and I just have to fill in audience reports on what we're seeing.
Okay.
And they would sit down at the end. They would watch whatever programs they wanted to watch on the channels. Then I as you can imagine, Jack, I went right for the early Doctor Who that I'd never seen. And they would write out, we think this is a good program to have on. Or we're not sure about this, or whatever. So and we had it for 18 months. Or whatever it was, or a year, 18 months, whatever it was. But Poltergeist was one of the movies that their movie channel had, and I watched it because I wasn't meant to.
Of course.
So consequently, I've had a 30-year gap from it because I knew it so well around about 1991. But I'd be thrilled to see it again because
it's worth revisiting. It's a great film.
I used to that one and a couple of other little horrors that I wasn't meant to see, The People Under the Stairs and things like that.
Oh god,
The People Under the Stairs is incredible.
Wow.
I had on a tape and I used to hide this tape because I used to because I was bloody savvy as a kid, with the technology that existed then. I don't know what happened to me, and I used to always sneak taping things. My parents had no clue.
But very disturbing. I mean, really, really down and dirty, disturbing film.
And wasn't that effectively a TV movie? Was it not? It wasn't a cinema release, was it? The People Under the Stairs. I think it was a bit like Salem's Lot, and in the sense that it became known as a film, but it was actually a TV movie.
Wow.
I didn't know that. This is all stuff I'd love to talk about with you. I mean, Poltergeist, definitely. I love Toby Hooper's Salem's Lot. It's possibly my sort of original horror.
I remember being goaded to watch that. I was 9 years old, and I had a very curious thing that happened one summer holiday where this is a random story. The doorbell went. I answered the door, and on the other side of the door was one of the kids I avoided at school. He was basically the combination of Bart Simpson and Nelson Muntz. He was the kid that your parents didn't want you to hang around with, and I was like, and I just didn't. We sat on different tables, and I had nothing to do with him. And he used to hang around with this other kid who went away for the summer, and he just stood there on the other side of the door, and he'd sort of randomly selected me for like hang out for summer. I was like, okay. And I remember sort of going with this, like, not sure for about the first week what the hell was going on. And I remember my mother saying, I'm not sure about this new friend of yours. I was like, you're not sure? I'm not sure. But,
I'm not sure. I think there might be a Wicker Man at some point.
I was wondering, if I was going to be like, oh, Jesus Christ, oh my God. But the entire this one summer, because he was like one of those kids who was he was that little bit more advanced, street smart. He was that little bit more about some things he knew, and I had the crazy. And part of that 6 weeks was I've got this thing called Salem's Lot.
Oh my God!
And I was like 9 or 10. Yeah. He was the same age as me, but he came across like a 12-year-old. The stuff he knew was like I had an education and I remember watching it and being absolutely petrified, but trying not to, because this kid, he was the cool kid, but that's etched on my brain.
I can imagine. Wow.
But I have to thank him because he was strangely massively into, because it was still at that point where none of us had really discovered music yet. That sort of came along for me more like 12, 13. And he was absolutely obsessed with Kate Bush.
Right. What?
Oh. Kate Bush album.
This kid, he's got good taste. I'll give him that.
There's depths and complexities here.
He was a frightening child. And, he was, I don't know whether he was a bit of a bully to other kids, but, he was certainly enough to put me on my guard. And then this, I wonder what happened to him. But there was the Kate Bush stuff, there was the Salem's Lot, plus other things. But I remember also we in total Blair Witch fashion, there was I grew up in a very rural part of Devon, and there was a house that was cut off from everywhere. That basically the woods had grown up around it, and it was known as the pink house, and that was because one wall, part of the house, was sheared off, and one wall was painted pink above the. Oh,
you do realise, Elliot, I'm going to be stealing this for stories. That is fantastic. That is superb.
All about, running, touch the door, running, go through the door, go up the stairs, blah blah blah, and anything like that. And there was a tunnel that was not far from it, an underground railway tunnel.
Okay, now hang on. Are you did this happen in reality, or is this
all things
just dreaming this?
And this was all the same 6 weeks summer holiday. We did the pink house, and he scared me witless of the pink house. And then the next day he had this other excursion lined up, and he said, "Okay, we're going to this tunnel." And we had 2 older kids who had torches who guided us through, and went on for miles, and at the end of it was just a big iron door, and the realization back through it. And it was
sorry, I'm calling this is a dream. And then River Phoenix said, "Do you want to see a dead body?" That's what happened next, right?
It's totally like that. And you couldn't see your hand in front of your face, darkness. It was all that. And my parents always said you're never allowed to go to that tunnel. I swear to you, as the day is long, it's all true, Chewie. It's all true.
Yeah, but soon it's going to be fictionalized, and people won't believe it ever again.
Please do it. But yeah, the pink house was absolutely terrifying. All the stories that built up around the pink house were, very Blair Witch.
The pink house.
Yeah, that there was, that the father there had killed all his children and his wife, and it was all very like that. And you could. Were they still there? Oh God!
It's kind of ironic. We have
what the strange thing was, we got back to school,
which is exactly the same. It has all those myths around it.
We got back to school at the end of the 6 weeks holiday. The 6 weeks holiday passed. His real partner in crime came back from wherever his parents had taken him. Never spoke to me again.
So you were a surrogate. You were just
a surrogate. I was completely. But even though I think on some level I knew I was basically there because his real partner in crime wasn't about, I sort of got this great adventure and peculiar education across these 6 weeks, and then we went to separate schools, separate secondary schools, and but how bizarre. And that's just awesome. Some lot has triggered all that memory.
Wow.
Kids can be wonderfully utilitarian, can't they? It's just you're my substitute friend for a while when my real friend comes back.
And I was one of those kind of loner kids. I mean, but my mum used to turn people away. So people used to come and call for you and say, "Oh no, I don't really feel like it," and you go off to your room and read or something.
Oh, I was like that.
This period where you were more gregarious, you were more social. She said, but it would come in fits and starts. It was almost like you felt you had to. She said, but I can remember so many times people coming to the house, and I would say to you, "You're so rude. You'd always turn people away. They'd come to." Come to ask you out to play, and and you go, "No, it's okay. I'm okay." I've sort of gone full circle. I'm that person again now.
One word on the Poltergeist films: avoid the sequels if you can.
I do remember the second one.
The second one has got moments. The second one has got the great Reverend Kane, who's a great villain, but it also has all of the 1980s tropes of the sort of magic Native American and all that stuff. It's like, let's just draw a line.
I have a serious soft spot for the third one because it's about a tall building, and I have this. It's like it's set in a skyscraper, and I have a completely, to me, unfathomable, long-standing, since childhood, pre-rational fascination with very tall buildings.
Right.
And it's also about, and another thing I have a similar fascination with is mirrors, and it's full of fucking mirrors.
Yeah, I was going to say mirrors play a big part in this.
Whereas I was taken to a specialist or something because my parents got very, very worried because I used to walk around cities looking at my feet. And when they said, "What's the problem?" I would say, "I can't look up at tall buildings." Fine.
Right.
Couldn't do it. And, all this was sort of put to bed for a while. And then in 2003, I did my very, very first visit to New York, to Manhattan. And I was walking along, absolutely froze in the street, and my partner said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "They're going to need some help." I said, I'm going to need you to walk me. I was having basically a panic attack, and it was exactly the same thing because I'd never been around buildings that tall.
Right.
So whereas when I was a kid, it was maybe London. Had a certain skyline, but nothing like the States. And it all came sort of flooding back. But I was taken to see someone. I mean, all I remember is she was eating cottage cheese when she was going. Pretty bizarre how these things stick in your head. And
very interesting memories.
She said it was called Babel syndrome.
Oh yeah,
Babel syndrome.
Yeah,
she said. Wow.
It said your rational brain will learn that once a foundation is big enough, you can basically build as high as you like, but you think the thing's going to fall on you. That's what.
Interesting.
But excusable when you're 5.
Yeah, very interesting.
Not when you're 23.
I have. It's an anxious fascination. It's not just I love them, but I am fascinated by it. When I was a kid, when we'd go to London, I would beg my parents to take me to Centrepoint and the post office tower and shit like that. And I didn't necessarily want to go in them and go to the top and look out. What I loved to do was stand at the bottom and look up.
Yeah, brave boy. Brave boy. Because what I still do to an extent.
And elevators, I'm fascinated by.
Oh yeah, I was fascinated by elevators. But if I were to look up at buildings, even now, if I'm in a city with a big skyline, my knees go soft. I start to sort of crouch.
Oh, that is fascinating.
And my shoulders hunch up, and I'm sort of, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And I sort of make myself do it. But it's but the other odd thing is it only happens in certain weather conditions. So if it's really cloudy, I'm terrified. If it's nighttime, I can look up. And if it's a complete canopy of blue, really lovely summer or spring day, I can do it. Now it's just limited to cloud cover. It's so odd. I mean, what's going on with my brain?
It's fascinating.
I wouldn't want to speculate.
So I just loved the idea of going up and down in lifts and I became fascinated with the scene in Franz Kafka's America where he becomes the elevator.
Oh yeah.
I love those chapters where he's just the elevator boy and they keep him working and he's almost falling asleep on the stool. But it's just the fact that all the action just takes place in the car. Oh God, I love that book. I haven't read that for years. That's a cracker. Sorry, we've really went off the point, haven't we?
No, I agree. It's my favorite. It's my favorite of Kafka's novels.
Yeah, mine too. I've not read it in many years, but it's batshit at the end, isn't it? With the circus.
Well, it's Kafka, isn't it?
Crazy, yeah.
But even by Kafkan standards, it's like, oh shit, we're in a circus now. And
people don't get. It's funny. People don't get it. It's funny.
Yeah. So funny. I mean, it's
deliberately
with a sting.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't understand how people don't.
I feel sorry for Kay in that book. I mean, my God.
I don't understand how people don't get the humor in Kafka's work.
It's one of its closest literary cousins is the bloody Marx Brothers, I tell you.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in the same tradition of zany Jewish storytelling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Totally.
I mean, I often think there's parts of
the Coen brothers.
Coen brothers. Oh my God, Serious Man. I mean, that is so Kafkaesque.
Yeah. It's so Kafka.
Not in the obvious superficial way when people say Kafkaesque.
No,
the proper way. When
people say, again, the cultural discourse around stories misrepresents them. People say Kafkaesque, they think black and white shots of corridors, shadows in Prague and filing cabinets and shit. No. That's the Third Man you're thinking of.
Yeah, you're thinking Third Man. I mean, I know it's quite a conscious evocation of Kafka, but last year I reread Ishiguro's The Unconsoled. I mean, that that is another artifact that if I was whisked off to a desert island, I could read and reread and reread, and I can get lost in that book. I adore that novel.
Yeah. And I have some pretty serious problems with it, but I do just love it. Even the bits I have issues with, I love. Yeah,
I mean, I actually rather like how wonderfully undisciplined a lot of it is. It's the book that only a hugely successful writer with a canon behind them already can get away with getting published. Frankly,
yeah.
But I do adore it. Yeah.
Okay, guys, I'm going to sign off. This has been great. I've missed our chats.
Yeah,
Indeed,
absolutely.
yeah, it's been a real pleasure.
So, I mean, should we say in the new year for the next one? Yeah.
Yes, I think it was "Don't Look Now" was our first.
That was it. Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jack?
It's fine with me. Don't Look Now is actually visually referenced in the Omen remake, but amazingly.
Oh wow, there you go. We can
segue.
Yes,
brilliant.
It's when you're making a deeply mediocre film, it's a very bad idea to deliberately remind the viewers of a masterpiece.
Yes, to evoke a better film. It's something you don't do. It's something you don't do.
But never mind.
Cool.